how is it that the President of the United States can say there's not a smidgen of corruption?
While the IRS was subjecting me to multiple rounds of abusive inquiries with requests to provide every Facebook and Twitter I'd ever posted.
There are lies upon lies in this ugly episode.
I still have not been contacted by the FBI.
41 witnesses haven't been interviewed, including the 2 that are here right now.
Are you going to let them get away with this?
Well, conservatives not happy. They still don't have answers about the IRS scandal, and taxpayers may not be happy when they hear this. In the middle of all this scandal, the IRS is handing out more than $60 million in bonuses to its workers. But should it? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asset. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Mr. Steve Forbes out in L.A. this week. Rich Karlgaard, Elizabeth McDonald, Mike Ozanian, Rick Unger, and Bruce Japsen is with us again. So, Steve, should the IRS be handing out these bonuses?
David, no. Talk about public be damned. Talk about contempt for the public. This is a prime example of it. Here's an agency that's become a rogue agency that engaged in political suppression. That's being swept under the rug. The president brazenly tells Bill O'Reilly that there's not a smidgen of corruption in a corrupt agency. And now this comes along. They're going to get bonuses because the new commissioner says it will hurt morale not to get it. How about the morale of democracy?
Well, and Bruce Japsen, the president, now says there's not a smidgen. Before he said there probably was a smidgen. So what do you think? Should there be bonuses handed out to these boneheads?
Well, I don't know if it's really, we're talking about a bonus. We're talking about, it's a very small payout of like maybe a 1% or so forth. But if you're looking at a pay for performance thing, I don't think it's really a big deal. I mean, we want the government to adhere to some performance standards. I would also take issue, Senator Orrin Hatch was out with a comment this week that said that he couldn't find a less deserving group of people to get a bonus. And I don't know, maybe he ought to look in the mirror with the Congress, the way they've been performing. So a paid for performance
but two
situation,
wrongs don't make a right, Bruce. You know that.
Right. Well, I'm just saying that if you're tying government workers, if you're going to give them any kind of raise, it should be tied to some sort of performance measure. And I think that's what they should be looking at with government in the long term,
fair
which
enough.
is what the
But the fact is, Rich Karlgaard, when you look at, say, the performance of, I don't know, Lois Lerner, for example, one of the heads of the IRS, who's right in the center of the storm, when you look at her history, what she has done, what she hasn't done, what she has pursued, what she hasn't pursued, did she deserve a bonus? She got $42,000 worth of bonuses in 2010, 11, and 12.
Steve is right. They do not. This is a very corrupt organization. Now, to sympathize with Bruce, it doesn't apply to the majority of people who work at the IRS. I feel sorry that they're tainted by the people who've indulged in this corruption. The kind of corruption I'm talking about, the liberals like to say, well, maybe a few conservative 501c3s that are a little bit dodgy have been investigated, but it's anti-abortion and Catholic organizations, it's pro-Israel organizations, it's Republican donors, conservative journalists. The selective enforcement by the IRS is just astonishing.
Well, and EMAC, we already have the Inspector General's report that says that they screwed up big time, that they were targeting Tea Party groups, that this charge by the left that it was equal Tea Party or even a little bit of progressive movements in there. That wasn't true.
Yeah, when you watch the hearings, David, when you see what these individuals went through, you have to say to yourself, wow, this is really striking. There's something really wrong here that these people are being punished for their views on reining in government, spending. The irony is now we're spending money on the very IRS officials that were at the root of this and giving them bonuses. I say give them bonuses in the form of government debt. Short-term debt, meaning give them a short-term incentive pay, 5-year bond, long-term incentive pay, 30-year bond.
That's a
Pay them
great
off with government debt.
I love that idea. But Mike, to EMAC's point, Lois Lerner, she was getting bonuses for all of her work while she was holding up the Tea Party applications, but at the same time, she was sending right through some applications that didn't deserve it. Like there's one organization, a very shady charity, headed by the president's half-brother, another Obama, that operated illegally for years. Once it was pointed out that it was operating illegally, they put in an application for a 501c3. They got it almost immediately. So she really fast tracks through friends of the president, but enemies of the president, not so.
David, it's absurd that a part of the government that's being used by the Obama administration to target its perceived enemies should get bonuses is completely absurd. this really, is something that rankles taxpayers. And even if you're not against the IRS per se and what they did, or you have doubt, think about this. How much more can this expand with further administrations down the road as the IRS continues to get bigger? It's a very bad precedent.
Continues to get bigger and more partisan. And Rick, for all of the talk from the president and his allies that this was all a problem in the Cincinnati office, today we saw an email, or this week we saw an email from Treasury Department. A woman named Ruth Madrigal saying, keeping tabs on C4s, and this went out, by the way, to Lois Lerner, among others. We mentioned potentially addressing them off plan. That means out of the public record in 2013. I've got my radar up, and this seems interesting. Ruth Madrigal works at 1500 Pennsylvania Avenue, not anywhere near Cincinnati, Rick.
That's IRS headquarters, right, David? Yeah.
Yep.
Guys, well, I appreciate that the topic is giving you all a wonderful opportunity to vent and to make your political statements. What I find
political statements. We're going against their politics.
What I find odd about it is you all seem to be saying that but for this scandal, if this had never happened, apparently you would favor giving bonuses to the IRS.
No, the question is, hold on, whoa. I'll ask the question. The question is, should we be rewarding this kind of behavior with bonuses? That's the question.
You shouldn't be rewarding government employees with bonuses in any situation. Had this scandal never happened, I'd still be here saying, why are we giving bonuses to government employees? You know where the bonuses come for IRS employees? When they leave, if they're auditors and they leave the service, they go into private practice and they make a fortune because they know what they're doing. Same with tax lawyers at the IRS.
Okay.
That's when their bonus comes. So let's not confuse the two. If there had never been a scandal, we shouldn't be giving them bonuses.
Steve, we have to put the two together because certain individuals have been rewarded for doing stuff, or at least during the time at which they were doing stuff, that most people find abhorrent.
So you would support bonuses
Steve,
if this hadn't happened?
Go ahead.
Yeah, it sends the profoundly wrong message to the public. It just says it doesn't matter what government does. We do our own thing our own way. Yes, there may be good people in the IRS, but overall this agency has gone way off the track in a way that it's never done in its history, and it's had a very checkered history. And to give bonuses in this spit in the public's eye like this is just so profoundly wrong, especially coming after the president says there's not a smidgen of corruption. Right. We know there is. What do they think we are?
That's a good question. Bruce, what about Rick's point? You usually agree with Rick, but he says you can really make your money. If you're working for the IRS, you get out of the IRS after you've done your service, and then you work in the private sector. That's where you get your bonus.
Well, certainly that's true, but I mean, I don't think that these were bonuses in the sense of something that Jamie Dimon would get at the bank. I mean, we're talking maybe it was 1% of people's salary, something that was taken away in the sequester. I mean, I do agree with Rick that obviously you have people that can go into the private sector and make more money, but we've started to frown a little bit on that because then people say that they're banning certain members of Congress and certain government workers from going into the private sector right away.
The IRS budget is up 52% since 2001. The total number of tax returns filed, corporate and individual and others, is only up 6% over that time period. They're getting a lot of money, and they're basically, yes, I get Congress is neurotically fiddling with the tax code every year, but this really does send a wrong signal to have the officials at the center of the scandal getting bonuses.
And rich incentives matter. When you give rewards to somebody for their behavior, even if their behavior is bad, doesn't it encourage more of that bad behavior?
Sure, it's a wink and a nod to terribly unethical behavior, and it's only going to get solved by an independent prosecutor. But let me stand in defense of my friend Rick. I think he does make a good point, and it's not either or, Rick, it's both. I don't think federal workers should get bonuses, particularly, if you had a business that was running a 20% deficit, spending 20% more than their revenue, which describes the federal government, kind of a bad time to give out bonuses.
I would say so. I think everybody would agree